So what is it about the Bible? Right, the title of our last meeting today is, What is it about the Bible? How does the Bible differ from the study of any other book? For 30 years before I came here to the University of Georgia, I was at the University of California, San Diego, which has no Department of Religion. And so I was in a Department of Literature there. So my colleagues taught French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Latin, Greek, Russian, all different national literatures. But I was always aware that what I was doing was different from what they were doing. Even though I was a professor of literature and I could have said, well, I happen to do Hebrew literature, you happen to do Chinese literature, our common interest is literature. But I could have said that all day long. It didn't change the fact that I knew, they knew, the students knew, we all knew that teaching the Bible is different. There are people who at some universities call Bible as literature. They give courses under that title. To the credit of my colleagues at the University of California, not one ever gave a course called The Bible as Literature. I find that a very strange concept. Would you give a course called The Brothers Karamazov as literature? Hamlet as literature? I mean, you would never do that. It's because they are literature. So as soon as you say the Bible as literature, you're acknowledging that it's something else. And same thing if occasionally somebody, a historian, would give a course called the Bible as history. When you give it the Bible as something, it's not that something. So when I would teach, I would get different kinds of questions from my students than my colleagues did. And I would say that the things I was teaching affected the lives of the students more personally than my colleagues who gave a course on Hamlet or the Brothers Kay, even though those are works that really can and should affect your life if you're a thoughtful person. But it ain't the same as the Bible. And the bottom line is when you check into a hotel, you know, there isn't a copy of the Brothers Karamazov in the drawer. There's a copy of the Bible in the drawer. On the Bible, that more amateurs are drawn to it than any other field. I've claimed that over the years. I haven't changed my opinion of that in 39 years. I can't think of any other subject that draws people who aren't professors of that to give courses about it, who aren't scholars of that to write books about it, as if they know and they're going to show the scholars. People can't even read it in the original, do that. Probably Freud second, Bible first. I once said to a colleague of mine who was a Nietzsche scholar, I said, you know, I really think the Bible draws more of that, like people who aren't expert in it writing about, than any other subject. And he said, yeah, and Nietzsche second. And he knew that I was writing a book that had a whole section on Nietzsche in it at the time, so I took his point. But at least I consulted with Nietzsche scholars, and I read German. And I really worked like for a couple of decades before I wrote that 1/3 of a book on, about Nietzsche. That's my bit of apology, and even then I recognize I did something outside my field. But Bible, everybody writes about the Bible. There are frauds, things like von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. There are people who claim to have found the lost Ark, usually in Jordan. There was Hancock who claimed he found the lost Ark in Ethiopia because there's this people in Ethiopia, they wouldn't let him see it, but he said it was under this thing in the back and that he was sure it was the Ark. And a scholar in England who really is a scholar of Ethiopians said, I've seen it. I went there, they showed it to me. The reason they didn't show it to him is they had no respect for him because he couldn't speak their language, so to them he was a barbarian. And I said, oh yeah, it's over there, it's behind that. People who say they've gone up and found wood of the Ark on top of Mount Ararat. They say it's sort of vaguely shaped like a boat, and therefore, and you go, well, that's the proof that it's not the Ark, because the Ark in the Bible isn't shaped like a boat, it's a box, you know. Scholars in other field, Velikovsky, who wrote this book that's still popular out there to this day, explaining the miracles of the Bible because of astronomical events. And he was a respectable scientist. Geologists have gotten in touch with me, proving Sinai was a volcano, proving the flood happened and how it happened. Freud's Moses and Monotheism, his last book, I've talked about in this course. That one is an outsider, a non-professional writing about the field, but at least I respect it. The parts that are right are brilliant, and the parts that I think are wrong are still Freud wrong. They're not stupid wrong. Freud was, you know, one of the 3, 4 smartest people I know, of whom I know. And so when he was wrong, even it's brilliant wrong, it's not stupid wrong. Literary scholars, English lit professors who give courses on the Bible, and like P.D. James, the mystery writer who called the Bible the greatest work of English literature. I heard it myself on the BBC. She called the work, and I thought, yeah, but our Hebrew translations really capture the spirit of the original. My colleague, who I respect, Bob Alter at UC Berkeley, Northrop Frye, Jeffrey Hartman at Yale, I mean, major comparative literature people and English literature people who've written and taught on the Bible. Alan Dershowitz, professor of law at Harvard, wrote a book called The Genesis of Justice, where he looks at Genesis from a legal point of view. He sent me a copy of his book. It was very nice of him to do that. Mary Douglas, the great anthropologist, she contacted me. I had the honor of getting to know her a little. I had tea in her house. She wrote a book called Purity and Danger, which is a classic in anthropology, where she tried to explain the forbidden and permitted animals anthropologically, which in her case meant things like, she said the animals that are forbidden are animals that are freaks. They are ones that live on the edges of society. So for example, she said, what is the natural food of a pastoralist? They look sheep and cows, occasionally hunting a deer. And then they say, what do all those have in common? And they notice over, just through nature, that they all chew their cud and have a split hoof. So they say the natural way for an animal to be is to chew its cud and have a split hoof. So a pig that has a split hoof but doesn't chew its cud is a freak, is outside the limits of what's right. And so that's why it's forbidden. And she went through all the forbidden animals and did that. I think she's completely wrong. And Israel were not primarily pastoral; they were primarily urban in the period when these laws were written. And interesting, Alter wrote a critique of Douglas. You have a comp lit professor writing a critique of an anthropology professor. At least he reads Hebrew. He reads modern Hebrew. Mary Douglas did not read Hebrew, and yet argued about meanings of Hebrew words with me. And he said if she were right, then chickens and ducks would be forbidden because they're freaks, because a chicken is a bird but it doesn't fly, and a duck is a bird but it swims. And so those should have been forbidden if she were right. And I said, Bob, there are no chickens or ducks in the Bible. They hadn't discovered chickens and ducks yet. And I don't mean to mock him, by the way. I want to say that he's a really honorable man in many ways, and a good colleague. He was at UC Berkeley, I was at UCSD, and he contributed to the first book I ever edited. But I'm saying that even people who are good, who have good instincts in their own fields, like Mary Douglas, Bob Alter, can go wrong when they go in the Bible because it's not their field. But what I'm after is not what can we say about these people who do it. What I'm interested in is what is it about the Bible that draws them? And the main answer is because it's the Bible. You say it's the Bible, damn it, but that doesn't seem like the right thing to say. Historians write, especially ones who write a long history. Now, it's true, anyone who writes like a history of the world or a history of the Jews or something that covers many centuries, even millennia, is headed for trouble because no historian in the world can be expert in all of that. So like Paul Johnson's History of the Jews, I mean the great Salo Baron, who wrote like an almost 20-volume History of the Jews, and Baron, he was my teacher at one point. I had the last course he taught. It was like his 51st year of teaching graduate courses, you know, and he, but his first volume of his great History of the Jews on the biblical period is just all wrong. It's just not good. But that doesn't mean Saul Baron's a bad historian. He was a great historian, but you just can't cover it all, and especially for the biblical period where you got to do like 8 or 9 languages and this whole history of the ancient Near East and know about all these pagan religions and all that. It just, I mean, how many hours are there in a lifetime to do that? But they're attracted to it. And then there's the nonsense, like the Bible Code. If you, there are these books about the Bible Code where you count every 17th letter of the Bible and it spells Paul McCartney is dead and, you know, stuff like that. Dr. Laura, you know, who wrote a book about the 10 Commandments, and actually her rabbi wrote it. Karen Armstrong, whose book, God, a Biography, is a piece of crap. I'm sorry, I wanted to use the technical term that we scholars use. She has no credentials whatever. She has an undergraduate degree in English Lit, and she's an ex-nun. Those are her credentials. And she writes these books that are phenomenal bestsellers. And the book is just a work of ignorance. There, did I get that off my chest? Philosophers, Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling is quite a remarkable book. It's a whole book about the sacrifice of Isaac, and it has great, great things in it. But it's not that it sheds light on the sacrifice of Isaac story. I'll come back and I'll tell you in a moment where I think where the light is really shed in such a book, which is, you know, a good book. So there's good books and bad books, but what I'm after is that all these come out. You can't pick any other book. Pick the greatest. I mean, pick, you know, Oedipus and the brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment and The Idiot and Anna Karenina and whatever you consider, you know, belonging on that list of the best books and the best dramas. Hamlet, to me, is the greatest of Shakespeare's, but that's just me. Everybody says it's King Lear. I don't understand them. So what is the difference? I think the first reason is because the Bible is both literature and history. And not too many books are. So it has this tremendous history, a history that happens to be tremendously important, both to the Jews and to the religions that related to that, Christianity and Islam. And so some people will say it has these great literary qualities. The professors who give the courses called Bible is Lit, I wish they wouldn't do that, but I do see that they recognize that when they read the Garden of Eden story, there's something extraordinary there, that you could put the standard that you would put to any work of literature and say, well, what makes it great literature? And the standard would live up. And yet, if you want to uncover history, like I'm after, like, did the Exodus happen, and how did that impact on the birth of monotheism and on the notion of treating aliens right and all that sort of thing, that's all in there too. And the two are wound around each other. So which is the literature part and which is the history part? And second, in a broader sense even, that it's a composite work. It's prose and poetry and law. When I ask people, is the majority of the Bible prose or the majority of it poetry? Most people have been reading the Bible their whole lives. Rabbis, ministers, they really have to stop and think about it. They're not sure. It's prose, by the way. But it's close. And law, also records, census, itineraries, genealogies, lots of cubits, measurements, architecture. It's composite in terms of authorship. You've all seen that. I mean, we're looking between 100 and 150 authors of this book. So it's not by any individual. It's a book that's written by a community. That's interesting. And third difference I'd say it's important is that it's sacred. People have feelings about it. There's a reason why they put it in the hotel drawers and they don't put other great books in the drawer. So people have feelings about it. And why do they have those feelings? It's because of its union of literature and history. And that's what makes it the Bible. And that's why literary study of the Bible without history must be incomplete. And historical study of the Bible without literary study and without, religion, theological study is incomplete. And what's at stake? It's the importance of the Bible, historically to the Jews. The Hebrew Bible, and here I mean specifically Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, is the clearest meeting point between Jews and Christians. It's the obvious thing that they most have in common. In contemporary times, if you know your Bible and know that whole world, it makes the modern Middle East much more understandable. I don't care if Ahmadinejad disagrees with me. Biblical scholars are less surprised on average, I would say, by events in the current Middle East than other people, because it's so similar to stuff that's going on in the past. I know they didn't have oil then. I mean, I understand things change. They didn't have missiles, but some of the essential dynamic it goes all the way back. And I don't mean something like when people say, well, the Jews and the Arabs have been fighting each other for thousands of years. That's a lie. Jews and Arabs have not been fighting each other for thousands of years. And there's no Arabs there in the biblical period. So the roots of that present thing do not go back to the biblical world. That's just a lie. But still understanding the biblical world and the relationship of Israel to the other nations around it and the interplay and how they behave toward people who are not Israelite within the country and the Egyptian experience and the Babylonian exile experience and all of that all helps you to understand it. And I think without understanding that the roots, at least of Israel, are over 3,000 years old, if you don't get that, then you really don't get it. Whichever side a person, you understand, I'm not trying to sell somebody's side in that. And also because the Bible is the starting point of discussions of present concern. In the US, abortion, race issues, environmental issues, gender issues, capital punishment, teaching creation and evolution, stem cells, end-of-life decisions. For Jews, the definition of whether you're a Jew, whether it goes by patrilineal or matrilineal descent. Does it go by your mother or by your father? I mean, the list goes on. And especially in the current political moment, especially in the US, the Bible is a source of wisdom that could be helpful. And we could use some wisdom. So here's the thing. The Bible is a Rorschach test. You know about Rorschach test? That's the ink blot test in psychology and psychoanalysis. So you show the person a series of ink blots. It's a specific set of ink blots that are used. And they look at the ink blots and interpret them. What was that joke there? It says, who's this guy Rorschach and why does he keep making pictures of my parents fighting? The purpose of the ink blots, right, is to reveal something about the feelings of the person who's doing it. When I was at the University of Miami undergraduate, I took a psychology course. And if you've had psychology courses or majors and that, you know that often in psychology courses, they make all the undergraduates take the course. They have to volunteer to be the guinea pigs for some of the graduate students and the professor's experiments. So we were required to give a certain number of hours to some MA students' project. So I went in, and what it was they gave me these big, long, many pages of answers people had given to the Rorschach test. It's a spider doing push-ups on a mirror. It's, you know, two boxers. It's all of that. And they gave you these hundreds of answers, and we had to rate them from like 1 through 5 as being like good answers, bad answers, or like the middle was like neutral, doesn't shed light either way answers. So I look and somebody says, you know, a spider doing push-ups in a mirror, and I go, neutral? I mean, I don't know. You don't know what that meant to that person. Or if that, you know, another one said, you know, it's two people fighting even. It's a war. I don't call that a good or a bad answer, but so I'm putting neutral, you know, on almost all of them, unless they said something like that. Really, they couldn't have. I'm a little concerned. Like one person said, it's blotches of ink on paper. I gave that a good. I thought that. Good. Or if somebody would say something like, it's a spider and he's coming to get me. You know, they did stuff like that where I was a little, that would put in the concern column. So I did it all, and you know, hundreds of them. And then you're supposed to come back a week later for a second block of them. I come back a week later and I sign in, and the woman behind the desk says, "Oh, you're Friedman. We're going to give you all the points, you get the credit, but you don't need to fill out anymore. Goodbye." I didn't fit in this experiment at all, because obviously they were not interested in a bunch of undergraduate students' evaluations of other people's answers to Rorschach tests. They were using it as a reverse way of giving us a Rorschach test, right? If every time you saw the word parent in somebody's description and you gave that a negative or a positive, that told them something about you, not about the answer. And so, you know, just like a Rorschach test itself, they were using this as sort of a shadow virtual Rorschach test. And because I was actually being straight about it, that was not what they wanted. And so I was a nerd, basically. So I ruined that. So they threw me out of the sample. Now, life is full of Rorschach tests. When you see movies and you walk out and you're talking to your friends afterwards and you say, that was a bad film. The guy in that film was a jerk. The ending of that film was wrong. You know? Those reveal more about you than about the movie. And if you know, loved Titanic and your friend hated Titanic, outside of the fact that your friend is right and you're wrong, he said objectively, that shed as much light about you and your friend as it did about the Titanic. If it appeals to one person and doesn't to another person, well, why? And if that's the case with a movie, that it reveals more about the person interpreting it than about the movie itself. Then, because I mean, if little ink blots can reveal a lot about you, imagine how much a movie can reveal about you. And a play, Hamlet. Olivier's Hamlet, which is considered, you know, on film one of the great Hamlets of all time, begins where you see Olivier with his hair dyed blonde being Hamlet sitting there, and it says, you hear a voiceover that isn't in Shakespeare's play at the beginning saying, "This is the story of a man who couldn't make up his mind." Now, by doing that, it always seemed to me that Olivier ruined Hamlet. He put a perspective on the play right from the beginning that was his, not Shakespeare's, and that's how he played the character. Now, I've never understood Hamlet as being a play about a man who couldn't make up his mind. And this thing, they say Hamlet is a man who can't act, and that's his tragic flaw and all that. That doesn't shed any light on Shakespeare or on Hamlet. That sheds light on English teachers. You could have just as well said Hamlet is about an exceptional, insightful, principled man against a hopelessly corrupt world. And if you see that, you're very different from the person who said it's a play about a guy who couldn't make up his mind. Can't act. He runs the guy through the sword, through the curtain. He happens to get the wrong guy because he didn't know there was a curtain in the way, but he thought he was acting. He screams at his mother that she's in an adulterous, incestuous bed. He goes to kill his uncle who had murdered his father, except he's praying at the time, so he doesn't do it because he said, well, then he'll go to heaven and I'll go to hell. I'll have accomplished the opposite of what I want. That's not a guy who can't act. So, if a play or a movie can do that, and colors on or black blotches on a paper can do that, how much more can a book do it? If everything's a Rorschach test, a book's a real, that's up there. All Rorschach tests are not created equal. And if you say books are even more, so your view of, the Brothers Karamazov, means more than your view of, should I offend and say Harry Potter or, one of those vampire books, Have a heart. Thank you, I will. It's, why did you break up with that woman? She wasn't my type. That's sort of, okay. All right. The Bible is probably more of a Rorschach test than any other book because it's famous, because it's held sacred, because it has authority, because it has mystery. In the sense, much about it is unknown, the history in it, the history of it, the authors, the meaning. So interpreters of the Bible, including major scholars, good ones I'd really respect, frequently reveal more about themselves than about the text. When you write a commentary on the book of the Bible, you may as well just get undressed in front of everybody. You think you're shedding light on the text, but you're mostly shedding light on yourself. And I say that understanding full well that I've written a commentary on the Torah. I get it. That I try desperately to be actually shedding light on the text and teach people some stuff they didn't know already. But I know perfectly well that I must have given away all kinds of stuff about myself. And I was trying not to. Most don't think of trying not to, because they really just get it out there. And of course, trying not to is giving away something about yourself as well. So you can't win this game, So you read Genesis 3, the Garden of Eden story. How you interpret that, there's a lot of people who blame Eve in that, right, are different from people who see it, another way. People who call the story the fall and the original sin, that reveals that you're reading it through the eyes of later Christian interpretation, because the word fall and the word sin don't occur in that story, and it isn't clear at all whether they commit a sin or if it's rebellion or just human nature, or if it's God's mistake, not their mistake for making the world that way. But whichever one of those you choose, you're revealing something about you, what you saw in the text. And the text is just sitting there going, got another one. If you see the artistry in it, the puns and the brilliant dialogue and all the etiologies, the origins of things, all of that, and someone else reads the story and doesn't see that, right? You can say, well, see, I shed light on the text that other person didn't. Well, that's true, you did. But also, the text shed light on you and what you're able to do and shed different light on that person. If you see the theology of it, if you see one person like me reads it and sees the human and divine in conflict and compares that to other cultures and finds that interesting, and that works all through the Bible. And say, well, why? And you say, well, we feel ourselves to be at odds with nature, so in one of our most famous stories right at the beginning of the Bible, it starts out right away that we and God are at odds with each other. But someone else sees that and sees something different in it. Some people look at the Bible on the subject of homosexuality, and they look for a release from it to find some way that they could still feel that homosexuality is okay and still live with some verses in the Bible that say some pretty strong things. Others see confirmation of their feelings. See, the Bible proves I was right. It's bad to be gay, they say. Some look in the Bible and find a justification for war. They say, see, they fought wars all the time. God commands wars. Wars are okay. Others read the Bible and they see a hope for peace and a hostility to war and a recognition of war as a bad thing. Some look at the Bible and see a justification to use the earth as they see fit. Right? Once a Secretary of the Interior of the United States, whose job it was to protect the land and the forests and the water of the earth, said, no, God gave us the right to command. He gave us rule of the earth so we can do whatever we want with it. In that case, the Bible, as a Rorschach test, revealed that he was a stupid ass. Others read those same passages in the Bible and see it as a reason to care for the earth. God in the story gives humans the rights over the earth, and would you imagine that means, from the point of view of the text, you're allowed to manage it badly? I mean, the boss goes away and leaves you in charge of the factory for a month while he's away in Europe. And then he comes back. Now, during the month he was away, you ruined the spirit of all the workers. Morale is down. The quality of the products, you made it, in order to make more money, you made it lower quality products that would sell cheaper in the short run, but in the long run would break, and all of this, and you let the factory get dirty, and you know. When the boss comes back, is he going to say, "Congratulations, you did a great job"? So when in the Bible, when God gives humans control over the earth, you're supposed to kind of think that implies you're supposed to do a good job, not a bad job, not just anything you want with it. Now, call me crazy. But look, I just took a Rorschach test in front of you. So some look in the Bible and see a book that justifies prejudice and religious oppression. Others see love of fellow human beings and animals and the earth. So, in the end, what have we done here? In the end, the Bible may be greater than all of us. It exposes what we're made of. We think we shed light on it, but far more often it sheds light on us. And it will certainly outlast us. So, everything is a Rorschach test. So look hard into things. Be detectives. See how much you can see. Because the more you see, the more you find out what you've got inside you, and the more you enrich yourself. You don't just shed light on the subject, on the movie, the play, the book, the Bible. You enrich yourself. So I'll leave you with this last thought that I always like to leave my classes with. One last preposition before the end of the course. Live your life in such a way that at the end of it, if you're asked, was the world better because you were here? Or was it worse because you were here? Or did it not make much difference either way? Either of the second two answers are pretty sad. So you live your life in such a way that when it's over, since you don't know what day it will be over, so you have to live it now, that when it's over, you can answer it and just say, it was better because I was here. That's a pretty good lesson to end with.